Hey guys, the election is not far off now, September 23rd. If you haven't enrolled to vote yet, it is not too late. You can still get out there and sort that all out. Just go to elections.org.nz and they make it super simple. You get to choose who runs this country for the next 3 years. And trust me, it will affect you and everyone else in this country. So you want to make an informed decision. So we invited a bunch of politicians to come into the Shine TV studios and have a chat to us about what they are passionate about and what they're standing for. So enjoy this. Judith Collins of the National Party talking to Andrew Urquhart.
Honourable Judith Collins, kia ora, thank you for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Firstly, looking at your own motivations for getting into politics back in 2002, 15 years ago, almost to the day, really. Tell us about the reason that you got into politics in the first place.
Well, I felt at the time that New Zealand was going in the wrong direction, not the right direction. I felt that we were losing our way as a country. And after 3 years of a Labour government, I felt it was time for change. It was also pretty clear that it was the National Party needed to have some help from people who had very strong views about things and who would articulate them.
Now, to be fair, in the last 15 years, you've had various roles within government, and also, to be fair, you've had your ups and downs as a politician. Has your view of politics changed in those 15 years?
Well, what I know, there's a lot of things I know about politics, and one of the things is you can really get things done and you can make a difference. You can make a difference in opposition, as I did with the Health Select Committee inquiry into Agent Orange and its effects on Vietnam veterans and their families. But you can also make a lot more difference in government, which I've been able to do. But I also know is that in politics, if you're really good, then other people will come after you. And that I always consider is actually a compliment. And it's something that's happened to the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, all sorts of people who have been very strong advocates that, unfortunately, that does make you a target.
That's part of the democratic system we have here, I suppose, not only to put your own best foot forward, but to point out the muddiness of the shoes of the person standing next to you in some ways.
Well, certainly to throw stones,
yes.
And whether those stones are warranted or not, there are always people to do that. But I actually think that's part of the democracy, and in New Zealand, people use words rather than stones, literally, and that's a good thing. And I also think, too, is we have a very robust exchange of views in Parliament, and sometimes more robust than others. But generally, most members of Parliament, particularly those who've been around a little time, tend to have a lot of respect for the process and for each other. And I often find that I'm in a lot of debates these days with other MPs and candidates, and mostly the more experienced people are the most polite and the most respectful of others.
And it's been quite a robust campaign so far, with a lot of issues that have come forward. In some ways, it's difficult as the government, because you've been in power, you've had the opportunity to implement policies as the government for some time, to come up with fresh new ideas when it comes to the election. In some ways, you're on the back foot in that regard. But in terms of the National Party, what are your key policy platforms this election?
Well, we have several, obviously, and we've still got more policy rolling out, like today, for instance, a school for rural GPs, basically, in Hamilton. So that's the sort of thing which is completely contrary to what we've done in the past. It's actually about very much targeting resources where we know we need them, and in quite an innovative way. But also law and order is a major issue. It always has been in New Zealand, and it's one that people take very seriously. And so, for instance, the 1,225 extra police staff coming in, the first coming out of the Police College in October this year, that's the sort of policy that I'm very much behind, having been part of the group that actually brought that forward. So those sorts of things, but also the economy is absolutely crucial. And what I say to people who are so busy wanting to spend taxpayers' money is that without the economy doing really well, then there are no taxpayers. Actually, people have to earn the money before someone else can spend it. And I've always someone who's probably irritated the left a lot by refusing to call about government money, because I believe that there is no such thing. It's taxpayer money, and every taxpayer has a right to think that we are spending their money properly and to know that we're spending it properly. So there's that. There's also the major education announcement yesterday around more digitalisation and better outcomes for students, but also around languages and particularly around taking national standards and upgrading that into National Standards Plus. So you could say we are doubling down on better standards and better information for parents.
The challenge of the government of the day, I suppose, is that you've had the opportunity to implement policies for the betterment of all of us in New Zealand society, of course, over the electoral term that we've had and previous terms to that. The challenge of getting the balance right between having something new to offer voters and potential voters for the National Party, but at the same time it not looking like pork barrel politics. Oh, we bring out the lollies for the lorry scramble before the election, instead of this being an ongoing campaign during the, between elections, as it were.
Well, we've just been continuing on with the job, frankly, and I think that's why so many of our policy announcements coming forward work so well with what we've been doing over the last 9 years. So if you take the education policies announced yesterday, that's some new policy, but it's really in addition to what we've been doing. And the same with the law and order. If you take, for instance, the tax policy, which we announced in the budget in May, which is actually a tax cut because it's a change of the threshold for the tax thresholds, that doesn't come into effect until the 1st of April. So that will actually benefit every working family by at least $26 a week. It's quite a substantial amount, and that's something that differs. We differ from other parties because we actually want more people to have more money in their pocket. At the same time, we need enough tax coming in to pay for the police, to pay for the doctors and nurses, to pay for the hospitals, to pay for the schools, to pay for everything. And people sometimes are very willing to make promises about what they'll do with the money, but they're very iffy on detail about how they'll get that money.
Well, you can promise anything you like if you've got no chance of being voted in, basically.
Well, there is that,
yeah.
And also we see parties do promise an awful lot when they do have chances of getting voted in, but actually they think, well, we'll talk about the detail later. And quite often that means the detail's so bad they don't want to talk to you about it.
In the MMP environment, of course, it's all about having a coalition government, and it's unlikely that any particular political party will be able to govern on their own, particularly looking at current polls at the moment. But coalition means compromise. Other parties, smaller parties, have talked about what their non-negotiables are if they're coming to the table. What are National's non-negotiables that you won't compromise away?
We're not a party that goes into an election saying these are our non-negotiables, because actually we are a party that's been in government quite a significant part of the MMP history.
Yes.
So we're pretty sensible about that. So we obviously have our principles and we have our policies. And there will be some things which will be a step too far, but I'm not going to obviously announce those today. But ultimately, the form of government that we end up with after the election will be absolutely up to the people of New Zealand. So the National Party, and I've certainly done it myself, have worked with every party in Parliament for various things. We are used to having to do deals around how to get legislation through. And all I'd like to say to people when they ask me, how can you, make that work? I say it's like actually being in a marriage in some ways, except in this case, it's a different marriage on each day of the week, basically.
It's more of an arranged marriage. You don't get to choose who.
There's quite a lot of arranging going on. But I think it's like this, is that, yes, you have to compromise. And I think if you're in business, you understand that. If you work or if you live in with another person in a relationship, you understand this. It's all about trying to get the best that you can for the purposes you can for the people of New Zealand. And that means sometimes that you have to compromise. If you can't compromise, you can't work in an MMP environment. And actually, you can't even work in a party, because parties our party at the moment has 59 MPs. Do you really think that every single one of that party actually agrees with every single thing when they go into a caucus meeting to discuss it? The answer is it doesn't really matter. What actually matters is that they all agree on it at the end of that caucus meeting. And that's where we thrash out our issues, our differences of opinion, and we come out united. And that's really important. It's the same with any government.
It would also be fair to say that the campaign so far, there's been some interesting developments, and some of your current coalition partners look like they're in a bit of trouble going into the election. That changes the landscape for you?
Well, that's always the way. I always think that under MMP, you never ever rule things out until you actually get what's served up to you by the public. And, you know, New Zealand voters will make their own minds up. Personally, I'd like them to, do party vote national would be excellent. And if they're in Papakura, Judith Collins would be excellent as the electorate MP, as I have been for the last 15 years. But I think it's really important that a party like ours that seeks to be the major bedrock of the next government does not rule out every little person or every little party or whatever without actually a really good reason to do so. And there might well be some that do get rolled out, but it won't be by me, it will be by the Prime Minister.
Now, there is, of course, time between now and the election. We won't know the numbers until after we've finished the counting. Currently, though, it does look like Winston Peters' New Zealand First will be a form of whichever government is formed after the election. Now, of course, National has a history with Winston Peters, both within Parliament and as a partner. That's a distinct possibility for you in the future?
Well, my view is whoever comes through in that election time, the Prime Minister will try and make a deal with. But that's up to him. He will have to do that. And I think one of the things that people need to just realise is if they're worried about any possible coalition partners, their best answer is to vote for the National Party. The stronger we are, the stronger we can be in government. The more numbers we have, the better deal we can get around those policies that we are promoting and we're campaigning on.
The impact that a change in leadership in the Labour Party has had with Andrew Little stepping down and Jacinda Ardern, the Jacinda effect, as everybody is calling it. Now, that has certainly sucked the oxygen out of the room in terms of getting attention for a lot of policy areas. Has that been difficult to manage as the government in place to say, yes, we're wanting to put our policies forward, but not seemingly overcritical of individual personalities? Well,
we're a party that likes to be in government. And one of the things we know is that the more that we personally attack people, that the less people actually like that. They expect us to behave in a better way than everyone else when it comes to personal attacks. So we're not going to go down that track. What we're interested in doing is talking about the policies, because I actually think, and I believe the party believes this, is ultimately people sit down and make their decisions about voting based on who's going to do the best job for New Zealand and for their family. That's what they want to know. Strangely enough, people expect us to be doing that work rather than saying, well, here's an interesting personality today. There's always going to be a group of people who are going to be very interested in new personality, a new face, a new whatever, and that's fine. But ultimately, who votes? And the people who vote go in, just like a jury, in my opinion, go in and do the best job that they can, but they take it very seriously. And I've seen a lot of people going into those election polls and coming back out again to do the polling booths and coming back out, and they don't take their time to do that unless they're doing it because they think they're making a difference. And I think that's what most people vote on. They vote on policy. Personality obviously helps, all those sorts of things. It certainly gains the media attention, but the fact is we've got very good coverage from our party launch yesterday, our new policy on education. We're getting some very good traction, and I actually think that's what we're doing. We're just keeping on with the policy.
It has become, in some ways, a more of a presidential-style election than perhaps previous campaigns. And talking about the Jacinda effect and the national response to that is backing Bill, as it were. It's one leader versus the other in terms of capturing people's imagination. All of this focus on the leader and, yes, focus on the policy. Is this style over substance, do you think?
Well, I think there is a move towards more of the presidential style in politics, and primarily I think that's probably influenced by all the media attention to US politics. Whether that's necessarily a good thing. But I do think that we are very focused as well on our team, which is why you will see cabinet ministers and the rest of our team with the Prime Minister at various announcements and doing things, because we have been working really, really hard, and we've got a lot of policy coming out and a lot of ideas. So, as you say, we're in government for 9 years. We've brought through an awful lot of change, and we've got more ideas to go. So you don't do it all on day one. You actually have to be able to do what you can do and deliver on. And we believe that we've got those policies.
You talk about delivering for New Zealand, of course, that's the slogan, and people may see National as safe and stable. The flip side of that, safe and stable, could look a little bit tired and stale, as in these are the faces we've seen on our TV screens for so many years, and all these fresh young things from other parties rising up. Is that a challenge? Is that a balancing act, do you think?
Well, if people were that worried about it, then Winston Peters wouldn't still be here. I mean, he's been in politics for 40 years. Annette King was actually Labour's best performer, frankly, until she decided to retire, and she'd been in politics for well over 30 years. I think, there's always that if people are attracted to bright, something new. But ultimately, I think people do expect us to be focused on them. We really do have to deliver for New Zealanders, and we really have to be focused on them, not just who's around today, who might not be there tomorrow. I think most people are not nearly as shallow as many people, commentators, particularly in the mainstream media, think.
Now, going back, we talked at the beginning about your entry into Parliament 15 years ago. Now, in your maiden speech, you talked about how faith was something which was very important to you personally, how we're human beings created by God with the ability to choose between good
Absolutely.
and evil, and you still believe that 15 years on. Tell us about what you see to be the importance of faith and the influence of church in New Zealand society.
Well, I don't know that church is quite as influential as it should be. And I think one of the reasons that, if I was talking generally, obviously some churches are more influential than others, I think ultimately that people expect their churches that they belong to stand for principles. And if they see the church getting terribly involved in politics or various things and not actually standing up for principles rather than trends, I think they start to lose confidence. So when I look at the churches who are doing well, they generally have very clear sets of principles, and they do not mess around with, on the one hand this, on the other hand that. I think people actually want to have very clear views. Even if they disagree with them, they actually want to know what you stand for. It's the same in politics. I think it's the same in churches.
Also, going back to your maiden speech, actually, you talked just at the end of it about the vision you had for the future of New Zealand. 15 years on, how much of that vision has been realised, do you think?
Well, actually quite a lot. I think I spoke, it was a long time ago, but I think I spoke about every kid having a chance, actually, in other words. And actually, when I look at now, despite the fact that in the last 9 years we've gone through the global financial crisis, despite the fact that we inherited a recession and told we had 10 years of deficits and now we're in surplus, we have now got 60,000 fewer children living in benefit-dependent homes than we had when we came into government. That is a huge result. That means 60,000 children are now learning that work is something that's pretty normal and most people go off and do it. That's fantastic. When I see that in the last 2 years, we've created 180,000 jobs. We've helped the economy so that businesses can actually take chances with people. Things like, for instance, the trial period for employment. That's given opportunities for people who businesses would not have taken on in the past. That's given people hope, and it's given them a possibility of actually being in charge of their own lives. That, to me, is absolutely within my vision.
Just finally, Minister, this vision for the future, there'll be people watching this, listening to this, who are undecided as to who to give their party vote for. Final words to you, why should they give party vote to National?
Because the National Party believes what it stands for. Because not only do we stand for principles, but we're actually delivering for New Zealanders in ways that people don't even often know about, such as helping people out of poverty. And the best way out of poverty is not just by increasing benefits, which, by the way, we did for the first time in 42 years, the first government to do so recently, but also it's about getting people into work, making them work ready, but also giving them hope. We cannot survive as a country when we have so many people coming into the welfare system as we did in the past. And we've now got 4.8% unemployment. That is a fantastic result in a time when many other countries are struggling. So I just think if you want to have a country that actually continues to believe in itself, continues to want to move ahead, vote National.
Honourable Judith Collins, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview, and hopefully it made it a little bit easier in making up your mind about who you want to support in the upcoming election. We invited a bunch of these politicians down to talk about their parties and what they stand for, and you can see all of those videos at lifefm.co.nz. On top of that, there's heaps of other resources there about voting, sorting yourself out, and just figuring out the whole process, right? Because sometimes it can seem just a little bit much. Anyway, check it out, lifefm.co.nz.